Join us as we focus on extraordinary Catholic people, the Catholic life. Zoom in on unique Catholic places, the Catholic experience, and take a snapshot of local Catholic events, Catholic happenings. The Living Bread Radio Network presents Catholic Close-Up, Catholic Close-Up with Michael Roberts. We'll introduce you to people, places, and events that are shaping our Catholic culture today. And now, here's Michael Roberts with today's edition of Catholic Close-Up.
Coming up this weekend in the Diocese of Cleveland. It's an important weekend as all of the parishes in the diocese will have a special second collection for the Retirement Fund for Religious. And this time around, we're going to find out more about what the Retirement Fund for Religious is and what it does for the religious of the United States. And joining us now is Sister Rochelle Guertal. She is the delegate for religious for the Diocese of Cleveland. Sister, nice to have you with us. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Fantastic to have you. It's a busy weekend for all of the parishes in the diocese this weekend. I know, by the way, I should mention the same thing has been taking place over the past month in the Diocese of Youngstown as well, because we reach into there. I know that they have had some special collections and they've had the representation as well. Tell us a little bit about, I guess in a nutshell, what this collection is for and what it does.
Okay, originally when sisters worked in schools or hospitals, one, they got very low pay. Our older sisters talk about the days they had got paid $1 a day. And if the weekends they didn't get paid because they really didn't teach. And so there wasn't a lot of money, and it certainly was nothing put aside for retirement. And also at the same time, the government did not allow the religious to pay into Social Security. So consequently, the communities were responsible to take care of the older sisters, which worked for a while. But now as expenses, especially medical, have gotten so high, it just was no longer working. Thankfully, at this time, we are allowed to pay into Social Security, so our sisters are at least starting to get something back by how long they've worked after we started paying into it. But it does, of course, cause a huge problem with financing for all these people.
What's interesting, Sister, too, is the changing demographics and the way that, well, first our economy has changed, the demographics has changed. I mean, really, so much has changed in such a period of time that it makes this all the more important.
Correct, because, vocations are just not the numbers they used to be. Right. So consequently, like years ago, when a community would maybe have 40, 50, 60 young women coming in, they maybe have 2 or 3 every year or so. So consequently, they are earning income, but they're the ones that are actually helping to support all these older religious. And it's done lovingly. Nobody's begrudging anything. It's just the fact that it's just not numbers. Right. It's just not there.
And also, speaking of numbers, the other part of that is the rising costs. Of course, the economy has changed in that period of time, and so in theory, then the cost of living has gone up as well.
That's very true. And when the money is sent to the national office, one of the things they do is they look at what does it cost, let's say in this case, in Cleveland area of Ohio, to keep someone in an assisted living or a medical facility, so that when the money comes back to the communities, it is prorated by what the cost in the area would be. So the places that are higher priced, on the average, they would get a different percentage than the lower priced places.
Talk to us a little bit, Sister, about the numbers as far as religious are concerned in the Diocese of Cleveland. How many active, how many retired are there in the diocese?
One of the things I think I'll bring up is I remember, as a young religious, the days that there were close to 2,000 sisters in the Cleveland Diocese. Yeah. This year we are just a little under 800 for women religious, and 100 and something in the men religious, which makes us under 1,000 altogether. Surprisingly, when I go to meetings, I find out this is one of the larger dioceses. Even though we look at our history and say, oh, we've gone down so far, I know some dioceses only have 15 or 20 religious in the whole diocese. Right. So we're thankful for the religious that we have. Part of the problem that also comes in as the larger communities are going down in number, some of them are merging, like the Akron Dominicans have merged, the St. Joseph Sisters that were in Rocky River have merged with other communities, and while it's raised the total number, they're not all in the Diocese of Cleveland now.
Yeah, that's right, because didn't the Dominicans from Akron, didn't they combine with Columbus or something like that?
They combined with either 6 or 7 other Dominican communities. Right. Okay. So, but what's happening that is their presence is still here, but it's not the numbers it was.
Right, yeah. That's an interesting take on it. We are talking with Sister Rochelle Guertal. She is the delegate for religious for the Diocese of Cleveland. And coming up this weekend at all of the masses throughout the Diocese of Cleveland, there will be a special second collection for the Retirement Fund for Religious. If you are in the Diocese of Youngstown, I know that some of the parishes in the Diocese of Youngstown have been doing this particular collection and appeal throughout the month of November. Perhaps those of you that go to a Youngstown Diocese parish, you've already had the collection, but this particular weekend is for the Diocese of Cleveland. I know the Diocese of Columbus does the same thing as well, and also the Diocese of Toledo as far as our listening area is concerned. So, Sister, you mentioned that the money that we potentially donate this weekend in this special collection will go where? Remind our listeners where that goes, and it stays right here in the United States, right?
Oh, yes. It goes to the National Religious Retirement Office in Washington. And what they do is, as I was explaining before, they have a formula where they look at how many sisters are what age, and it's easiest for me to give my community figures because I know them. What percentage could retire in 5 years, what percentage could retire in 10 years. And they break that down as to how long, statistically, they should live beyond that point, and that we would have to support them with no income for them. And, like I said, for a long time, we weren't allowed to pay into Social Security and that. Right. So some of our sisters had very little Social Security because they were close to retirement when they finally started paying into it. Most of the communities now are paying, obviously, into it so that all sisters will receive something. But, when a sister is expected to live, and I say this from my own history, on $170-some a month, that's just not going to make it.
No. Nobody
can
do that.
Yeah, it just comes out that way because they were not allowed to pay for so long.
Very interesting stuff, and I think it makes it an important cause to support. Sister Rochelle, if somebody is out there listening right now and they're getting ready, they're thinking about masses this weekend, what mass they're going to go to, they live in the Diocese of Cleveland, what do you want to say to them? What do you say to convince them to perhaps give a couple bucks or so in this special collection this weekend?
One of the first things I bring up is saying thank you. For many of the Catholics that are going to church, they were raised with either teachers that were religious. Some of them have been to hospitals that were mostly started by religious. Some of them know religious men. So when you think of that, in one way, your donation at this point is a way of saying thank you for what you received. And it's one way that you can give back, shall we say, for something. The other thing is I always say, think of your parents. How are they making it on Social Security? And there's a real example of where you can say, oh, they do need the money. And that's the most concrete example we can use.
Sister, before we end our conversation, we have just a few minutes left. And we talk about the religious that have served their time and are moving into retirement. But I also think it's a good time, since you and I are talking, to talk about vocations, because there is still a need for religious men and women. We talk a lot about the priesthood, and obviously very much so we need priests, and Father McCandless can talk more about that. But there is still a need for religious men and women in our communities.
Oh, yes, because as a religious, I look at I can do some things that other people can't because my community backs me up. I can also, as the community decides, this is what a mission we're taking on, whether it's helping the poor, teaching in schools, whatever. my community supports me to do that. And I mean, there's a lot of great lay people out there that are volunteering their time in parishes and that, and, God bless them for it. But when somebody can give 24/7, it becomes a whole different approach to things.
Yeah. It really does. And again, I've been impacted by religious throughout my life in different ways, whether it was on a parish level or even being in a Catholic school. I mean, the impact is there, and I think that this weekend kind of brings that out a little bit more as we look back and we consider what religious have done, but also what religious continue to do, and the fact that we still do need those religious men and women in our Catholic communities. Once again, just before we close out here this morning, that there is a special collection at all of the parishes in the Diocese of Cleveland this weekend for the Retirement Fund for Religious. Please be generous. Please consider donating and helping those who have served others for most, if not all, of their lives. Our guest here has been Sister Rochelle Guertal. She is the delegate for religious for the Diocese of Cleveland. Sister, thanks so much for joining us. I want to wish you a very blessed Advent season and a very blessed Christmas as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The Living Bread Radio Network brings you non-stop Christmas music, beginning on Christmas Eve at 8 a.m. Tune in for all your favorite Christmas hymns. It's our gift to you. Listen on the radio, online, on our mobile app, or through your Alexa or Google Home device. Celebrate Christmas with faith, family, friends, and non-stop Christmas music right here on the Living Bread Radio Network.
And the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy, which shall be to all the people."
The Living Bread Radio Network presents the Bible Story of Christmas, narrated by Bing Crosby. Tune in on Christmas Day at 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. for this very special airing. Originally released in 1957, Bing Crosby reads the Gospel of Luke between beautiful Christmas hymns. It's the Bible Story of Christmas, narrated by Bing Crosby. Christmas Day on the Living Bread Radio Network.
A prayer to St. John the Baptist. O God, you raised up St. John the Baptist to prepare a perfect people for Christ. Fill your people with the joy of possessing his grace and direct the minds of all the faithful on the way of peace and salvation. Grant that as St. John was martyred for truth and justice, so we may energetically profess our faith in you and lead others to the way, the truth, and eternal life. Amen.
This is Zach Stahowski.
And I'm Matt Reichert.
We invite you to open your hymnal with us.
We'll examine the most beloved, enduring, and consequential songs we sing at Mass.
It's Open Your Hymnal, every Saturday at 11 a.m. on the Living Bread Radio Network.
You know, St. Pope John Paul II's Theology of the Body is one of those documents, one of those pieces of the Church that is so unique in that it has stood the test of time, and it continues to be such a revered document, such a revered teaching of the Catholic Church. I remember studying it in high school as part of our religion class. I went to a Catholic high school, and it is still very much studied today. And we thought it would be a great idea to bring in a chiropractor, a local doctor, who is going to talk about the theology of the body from his perspective. He is Dr. Nate Sikora, and he is a chiropractor where, in North Canton?
Actually, right here in Canton.
Oh, right here in Canton. Mm-hmm. But you go to St. Paul's in North Canton, right?
Exactly.
That's where I got that.
There in North Canton.
All right, Dr. Sikora, thanks for coming in.
Well, thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.
So this is interesting, and it's something that I know you've done a little bit of research on yourself here, I guess, is how we can put the two together from your perspective, because it does all kind of come together in a certain way. The fact that the way that we care and the way that we feel about our body goes along with what Pope John Paul II was trying to come across and what he was trying to teach with his theology on the body teachings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What really caught my attention from the very beginning, I believe, was just breaking down, that the study of God through the body is something that I get to experience amazing, like every day.
Sure.
I mean, every day I get to see the body's innate healing ability work. And so when I learned more about that there was a document written by Pope John Paul, which ironically kind of came into my hands. My mother's, I'm a cradle Catholic. I was raised Catholic, went to Our Lady of Peace, and when I grew up, moved to North Canton, went to St. Paul there in North Canton, and I was always just being taught the faith, but probably not being immersing myself in the day-to-day of, why am I Catholic and what does this mean to me?
Sure.
And so what's been really interesting is my mother, my daughter's entering her teenage years, so this is why it ended up on my lap.
Oh, okay.
And ironically, it was his feast day that it actually ended up in my house.
Oh, okay.
And I found out that I was born the same year he became a pope.
Oh.
So it's kind of this really interesting spiritual connection.
Sure.
But as I look at the breakdown of this, the word chiropractic, comes from a Greek word as well. It means chiro, which is hand, and practos, which just means being done by hand or practiced by hand. And so when I was just simply thinking about, my passion of chiropractic and my passion of learning about my spiritual self and my faith, they kind of started to blend together as I got to realize that chiropractic has a lot of similarities to the faith of Catholicism in the sense that there's a simple saying. We say the power that made the body heals the body. It's the most basic philosophical tenet that chiropractors will say. And so when I started to look at this, I said, well, what about laying of hands? I mean, laying of hands is something, I've learned from a really early age.
Sure.
And I do this every day with people. And I looked, and there's very basically 24 biblical references to laying of hands. But really, laying of hands is just comes from really a Greek word too, but it's basically trying to bring the Holy Spirit into the body.
Yeah.
We feel, as chiropractors, that the body has an innate intelligence, which we would call the Holy Spirit.
Sure.
Really, that comes from the universal intelligence, which is God. So there are principles to chiropractic, there's principles to theology, but as I studied it, I just was really amazed in saying, I get to see the body's amazing tenet to God every day. Well, that's kind of the basic stuff.
Too, Dr. Sikora, the fact that, again, God created the body. God created us, and each one of us are made in His image. We believe that in the Catholic faith. We believe that in the Christian faith. But the fact that we are His creation, it is a complex creation, and, there's a lot to it. And so I think when you put that into the equation as well, it makes sense, in other words.
Yeah, I think that people that are searching for God or searching, for a sign from God was really, there was a book it was Theology of the Body for Beginners, I believe. And it says the body, and this is from the Theology of the Body book, or a quote from that, is that the body, in fact, and only the body, is capable of making visible what is invisible. That the spiritual and the divine kind of show up in this one place. And it says that, the body, it's been created to transfer this visible reality of the world and the mystery hidden from eternity in God, and thus to be a sign of God. And I think that as Catholics, the sacraments are a way for us to visually, and kinesthetically experience the Spirit. And really, every day the bodies we're living in it is a sacrament.
Yeah.
So it was kind of interesting. I think one quote I liked that just shares that in the sacraments, spirit and matter kiss. It was something I pulled from that book. I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. We're talking with Dr. Nate Sikora. He is a local chiropractor, and we're talking about the theology of the body from a chiropractor's perspective. And he's kind of doing some research, and it's been amazing to see the similarities. He's also mentioned the principles of chiropractic, and I guess it'd be a good time to kind of talk more about that, because not everybody is familiar with chiropractic, I think. I am. My parents exposed it to me when I was younger. I haven't been in a while, though some days and actually after talking to you, it may change my mind. But, there is a lot to it. And so I guess talk to us about the principles that you kind of mentioned.
Sure. There are 33 principles to chiropractic. There's a simple textbook called Chiropractic Textbook that was published in 1927. Really hasn't changed too much, those principles, but that chiropractic philosophy is founded on. And the interesting, story behind chiropractic in my journey it was just the fact that I didn't have an experience with chiropractic. My parents really didn't have a chiropractor. They were very natural, holistic in the sense that they felt the body could do the healing, and we always tried to do and eat the right things, but I didn't have that mentorship of a chiropractor. So when I was going through school, I knew I wanted to help people, that I wanted to help folks, and always kind of had my mom always questioning that there's got to be other things. There's something else that I know this body can have or be helped with, and a very spiritual lady. I mean, I want to credit really my ability to do what I do is from my parents. They were very spiritual folks that had gifts that transferred to me in the way that God needed them to. But so ironically, I was looking for an avenue to become a doctor, and when I was an athletic trainer, I started to have the love of kind of the human frame, just mechanical work, and really not loving the chemistry behind things. So when I got a letter from a chiropractic school due to some of the testing I was taking to get into other schools, I was like, that's a perfect fit. And ever since then, I mean, I've really been blessed. Ironically, we talk in chiropractically, I don't know why I keep saying ironically, we talk about chiropractic has an innate intelligence. And I felt this funny that I was named Nate because my friends, we always joke, we call it innate. We call in and another letter 8. So, things happen, and sometimes you have to, if your eyes are open, you can see that there's no coincidences, that God is leading me. But so that's kind of how I got into chiropractic, and ever since, I felt a real passion for that. And one of the couple principles that I wanted to mention, I wanted to get to your question, I'm sorry.
Please. No, you're fine.
There are 33. We're not going to go through them all and make this, we could make a whole day of this. But there is something called the major premise. The first major premise is that the universal intelligence is what is called, and I consider God, is in all matter and continually gives to it all of its properties and actions, thus maintaining it in existence. When you read that, you think, well, this must be some Christian just talking. But these were based on just basic principles of universal intelligence, which we consider God. There's a couple other that kind of flow through that. The chiropractic meaning of life, the second principle, is the expression of this intelligence through matter is the chiropractic meaning of life. And so as chiropractors, we are trying to help the expression of this intelligence. We consider God, or really God's force, it being the Holy Spirit through our bodies. That, again, this healing force that can create life. To diverge just a moment, there were some separations of the body and the spirit. At a certain point, there's certain philosophies that separated that. And even in the church, there's a dualism about, Catholics saying, that God is all spirit, but he has become, he did send his son down incarnate, and we are spirits incarnate. But there's a saying about vitalism, which vitalism is just a basic sense of saying that our bodies have an energy, a force. We call God that created it and maintains it. And as chiropractors, we want to help maintain that healing ability. So if you think about this, science can put a man on the moon, but cannot produce a single living cell from its base elements. So there is an energy that is within us that keeps us alive. That energy, that electrical signaling from our brains to our bodies is really how we determine life, right?
Yeah.
If that signaling is done, we're done. And so as chiropractors, we try to help that expression. That's basically what we consider like the third principle is the union of intelligence and matter. Life is necessarily the union of intelligence and matter. We are that matter.
Right.
And it's really the union of that spiritual, our spiritual intelligence and that matter. And when that's connected, we can live that 100% function that we were built to and that God gave us.
Yeah.
So those are some of the basic ones I really wanted to share. There's a lot more.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I guess I never realized when you look at it from the lens of faith how it's almost meant to be that it's that you're a strong Catholic and that you're a chiropractor. I don't know. And the chiropractor that I went to when I was younger was Catholic too. So I don't know. It seems to be an interesting correlation. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean there is a Christian Chiropractic Association.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of them do mission work actually. They go out and do mission work. That's the main point of that. But that not all chiropractors are Christian, but I would say a lot of them definitely have the belief, or you'd have to believe they would. Now, there are some chiropractors who practice more we call mechanistically. And in that way, it's more saying, okay, well, we're going to break the body into its parts and pieces, and so I'm going to look at your spine, and I'm going to make sure the joints are moving, and if they're moving, you might feel better.
Right.
And that's great. as a philosophical chiropractor or someone with a philosophy, especially Christian, we believe a little more that that spine then holds the ability of our body to express itself fully or not, depending on its alignment and its position.
Right. So it's kind of like the starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting stuff, and again, it's a great way to learn more about what you do. I'm really glad that you came on and talked with us here. I know there's a lot when it comes to it, and like you said, we could do a whole show on it. Really,
we could do.
But it's interesting to me, and I think we're just about out of time, Nate. But one of the things that I do want to ask, I guess, if somebody's out there listening, and maybe they haven't had the experience of chiropractic, or maybe it's been a while. What's the answer to, I suppose, the main question of why? Why should I consider this? What's the best answer that you can give our listeners that are still trying to figure out whether or not they should do something like this and maybe see you in your office and experience chiropractic?
People are suffering. I mean, frankly, our society and our world is suffering from a lack of connection. We are lacking connection with other people. We're lacking a connection with our God. And in the most simplistic sense that I help with in my office, we're lacking a connection between our bodies, in our body.
Right.
I mean, we're lacking a connection from our mind and our body. Chiropractic is not a this for that. Truly. It can be. But truly, chiropractic is allowing the potential that you were given to express itself the most. And is really most successful in helping you maintain your health, or maybe to gain that back and to maintain that, just as you would brushing your teeth on a daily basis.
Sure.
Getting your spinal alignment checked is something that we don't even think about and take care of in the way that we should on a daily basis. And so I really am passionate about trying to teach people that from birth, for the rest of their life, they need to take care of their spine in a special way. And we are just the people who are going to check to make sure you're doing that. And if you're not, we can help get it back.
Yeah.
But it's really up to our clients and our patients and your listeners to start to take a look at their posture and say, posture dictates my health.
I'm
right?
one of them. Yeah, I need to do that. Dr. Nate, thanks so much. Dr. Nate Sikora has been our guest here on Catholic Close-Up, theology of the body from a chiropractor's perspective, but also learning more about chiropractic and ways that you can improve your health, but really going along with what theology of the body is and ways that you can treat your body and the way that you should be treating your body. Dr. Sikora, thanks again for coming in. It's been nice to talk with you.
It's an absolute pleasure. I come back as often as you like.
Thank you. And that's our show for today. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Michael Roberts, and until next time, be at peace. Tune in next week as we continue to take an in-depth look at our Catholic community right here on Catholic Close-Up.
Catholic Close-Up is a production of the Living Bread Radio Network in Canton, Ohio. For an audio archive of today's program, visit livingbreadradio.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week for another edition of Catholic Close-Up.